So we have grasslands on the eastern side of the state. We have, the forested mountains. We even have above timberline. Then we have all our riparian areas that kind of crisscross everywhere in between. There are many that we are watching for many reasons. Looking at how climate may be impacting them. How habitat loss and fragmentation is impacting them. Greater sage grouse is a big one for our sagebrush steppe ecosystem. It's what we call a keystone species. If we can help the greater sage grouse, we'll probably be helping a lot of other species, such as vesper sparrow, brewer's sparrow, sagebrush sparrow, sage thrasher, all of those species that use and, quite frankly, are not doing so hot themselves and are on watch lists such as the Partners in Flight watch list. Grasslands are one of our most imperiled ecosystems in the world. We're looking at burrowing owls. They have a really strong tie with prairie dogs, using their burrows for nesting sites. And they do migrate. They go south. They don't hang out here in the wintertime. Too cold. Burrowing owl would be another one. Lark bunting is a really interesting one. We've seen declines in their populations. So when you talk about migration, they come in and they are really fickle. They're going to go where the food is. No tie to, well, I stopped here last year, so I'm going to stop here again. Riparian areas, we have the cuckoo, the yellow-billed cuckoo, the southwest willow flycatcher, all really good indicators of ecosystem health. We like to segment into those ecosystems, right? So we have riparian over here and grassland over here and sagebrush over here. But then, how do they all work together? These birds fly over all of these habitats almost.
I don't know if you're familiar with the National Arboretums, but they have an eagle webcam. And there were 2 eaglets, and that was delightful. As I was watching these eaglets, that there was a difference in the development. I knew they didn't hatch on the same day, so obviously the one that hatched first was going to have a little bit of a head start. The second one was just not developing as much, and it can happen that you can have sibling rivalry and one can eat the other. And I thought, oh my God, I've got to just tune right out of this because I do not want to see this. It's normal for the development to be different different because they don't hatch at the same time. There can be up to a week difference in the hatching time. And that they were both developing fine, and that professionals did not see any evidence of all that. So then I tuned back in and was so relieved that we didn't have any terrible sibling rivalry. Haven't been back since they both flew the coop. When they got to a certain point where they looked big enough and ready enough to leave the nest, they didn't do it. But what they would do is they would take little leaps from one end of the nest to the other side. They're learning how to fly by not taking one huge leap and hoping their wings would work, but they're going first from one end of the nest to the other, and then you watch them go from one limb to the other, close by.
There's 3 different types of fish. We have freshwater fish that live their whole life in freshwater. We have saltwater fish that spend their whole life in the ocean. Then we have what's called anadromous fish, which are born in freshwater. They spend their juvenile stage in freshwater. Then when they get big enough, they move to the ocean. They get bigger. Then when they want to reproduce, they come back into the freshwater. So fish like salmon and striped bass will travel thousands of miles from the ocean and come up into the creeks and rivers back to the exact, within a few feet of where they were born, to lay their eggs and start the whole process all over again. There are these things called fish ladders. So early in probably like the 20s or 30s, they started damming up a lot of rivers and creeks and streams for water supplies for cities. Now that it's 80 years later, we have larger reservoirs and just better systems. Fish can't spawn because there's a dam in the way of where they're trying to go. So what they've started doing is constructing fish ladders. It's basically like a maze that the fish can swim up and get over the dam into the river so they can spawn, and then when they leave, they just go back down. Every fisherman has a story of the big one that got away. I had hooked onto probably close to a 40-inch striped bass up in the bay. I'm fighting it for a few minutes. It's peeling drag. It's a really good fight. You get it close to the boat, I can finally see the fish, and the fish looks me in the eye, shakes his head, the hook pops out, and then he's gone.
was driving here on 95, 5 lanes one direction, 5 lanes the other direction of just road. Five lanes one direction, 5 lanes the other direction. On just a square foot of road, there's no life. In a square foot of forest, you have so much life. Even in the soil, all the protozoas, nematodes, bacteria, that's incredibly higher in a forest because of the oxygen. And under the road, even that soil under the road, you don't have as much life because there's no oxygen, it's compacted soil. Nothing can exist on a road, right? And nothing really exists above. You might have birds fly over, but in a forest you have layers. There's lots of layers of life in a forest, and we have these 10 lanes of highway, and it's just us.
I had a tree that was dead, and my neighbor said, why don't you make it into a snag? And you don't cut it all the way down, you just cut it off where it divides at the trunk. It's still a home for a lot of animals. I'm across from an elementary school. With construction and stuff, they had to cut down a lot of trees, so I went to Maryfield and paid for a tree to be planted at Ashlawn. The gardener told me that oaks have about 300 caterpillars that live on them, different kinds of insects they have. They're a very good tree to support wildlife. So I picked an oak to put at the school. That's one of the best things you can do is plant I think it's a white oak tree, has the most diversified life on it, and then it will support the birds and other animals. I have a lot of chipmunks, squirrels of course, and in the summer I've noticed the butterflies, and they said it's really important to plant milkweed because the monarch caterpillars, that's the only plant they can eat. I'm trying to be more conscious of putting native plants, like tulips aren't native. Try to support the wildlife.